Hey, live.
This is House Education on April 28th, which is also Homeless Youth Awareness Day. And so we have with us today some folks to kind of give us a snapshot of the situation, hopefully with some relevance towards schools and their roles in all of this. And I'm just going to stop talking and turn it right over to you to introduce yourself, and we'd love to hear from you.
Great, thank you. For the record, my name is Lauren Higby. I'm Deputy Advocate with the Office of the Child, Youth, and Family Advocate, OCYFA, if you see that active places. Our independent office was created by legislation in 2022. We got up and running in 2023, and we're charged with advancing the interests of children, youth, and families directly impacted by DCF, focusing on child welfare, child protection, and juvenile justice systems. So for Youth Homelessness Awareness Day, I'd like to share some important framing facts about the national landscape and then also Vermont specifically. So there are 4 million young people ages 13 to 25 experiencing some form of homelessness in the United States each year. So that breaks down into 1 in 10 young people 18 to 25 years old and 1 in 30 children 13 to 17 years old. And again, that's the national landscape. Specifically about public schools from 2023 to 2024, public schools identified 1.5 million students experiencing homelessness, which is actually a 12.6 increase from the previous year. And that's actually the highest jump and also the highest number on record. So we're seeing the trending data of an increase of children experiencing homelessness in our public schools. This disproportionately impacts LGBTQ youth and then BIPOC family and children as well. I don't have those specific data points, but I can always get that to you if that is needed by the and then if we look specifically at our point in time count, which is the national day that we being the nation, tracks how many homeless people are either out of shelter, in shelter, or unhoused for 1 day a year. That's conducted by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, or HUD. There are approximately 4 in 10 unaccompanied youth experiencing homelessness that were unsheltered, right? So some people could be in shelter, still be counted in a point in time count, but there are 4 in 10 unaccompanied youth that were unsheltered.
I'm actually sure it's like 4 in 10 of the homeless youth
Correct.
were unsheltered.
Correct.
And use another term I was going to ask you about. Just say it again.
The 2023 point in time count from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, said 4 in 10 unaccompanied youth were experiencing homelessness that were unsheltered.
Unaccompanied means that they are emancipated, just not with their parents on their own. Okay.
Yeah, I would say not in the physical custody. So specifically too, if we're looking at Vermont data and what the picture looks like, I think it's important to bring up our GA emergency housing or general assistance emergency housing. And as of 4/6, so April 6, 2026, there were 257 eligible families with children that were receiving general assistance emergency housing in the hotels or in shelter. And that's really relevant data, right? Just a few weeks old. And then specifically, if we look at Vermont's point in time count, there were 3,386 unhoused people in 2025, but 19% of that, about 3,300 were children under 18. So that's there. But I think it's also interesting for us to discuss what that looks like on the ground, right, in Vermont in practice. So prior to this current role, I was with the Department for Children and Families, DCF Residential Licensing and Special Investigations Unit, and there I licensed the agencies and spaces, I like to say, that provided shelter and case management to unhoused minors and young adults across the state. I also ran 2 runaway homeless youth shelters in Brattleboro and Bellows Falls before that. And what I like to say is I previously worked in child protection in Philadelphia and in Chicago, and I was shocked to learn of the level of risk shelter providers are holding and what they're having to navigate, specifically with unhoused young people, both minors and young adults. And we all should really study this population and really have a tailored coordinated response here in Vermont.
Could you talk a little bit what you mean by the level of risk they're holding?
Yep.
A little more
So,
specific.
yeah, exactly, that's coming, so
Great.
I love where your mind's going, right? So pretty often, every week, we would have police officers drop kids off at our door saying this kid can't go home, can you please shelter them for as long as you can? We didn't have a lot of information about them, you know, it was hard to navigate parental consent, what level of intervention they needed. Another interesting part, being in Brattleboro, we would often get calls from the Brattleboro retreat about young people discharging that had no place to go. And so they're leaving inpatient psychiatric treatment and they need a place to stay. And congregate sheltering isn't always the best option for people with that experience. And then I think there's also a layer of what we have to understand, that our child protection agency wasn't adequately responding to the needs of 16 and 17-year-olds, right? So we would make, as mandated reporters, calls to DCF seeking assistance because this was abused or neglected child or abandoned child, and there was a lack of response. Does that sort of get at what you are seeking? Great. So I think the main point is that our youth homelessness providers catch the children and young people that have already fell through the cracks. So then how are we going to build in prevention? And I think education is the continuing theme through here, right? Because we know our education entities, institutions, our educational providers also have eyes on these kids most consistently as well. So I have met with the Agency of Education's McKinney-Vento homelessness liaisons regularly in this role, and the National Association of Social Workers School Social Work Chapters, another mouthful. And educators are dedicated to serving this population and they're asking for help. And so what can we do? What can the committee do? And what can we all do as part of that safety net? So one point is transportation remains a huge barrier across the state, right? Without access to consistent transportation, displacement, no matter how temporary, contributes to educational instability and it also increases chronic absenteeism. One major issue we ran into, as well, as trying to utilize Medicaid rides, and it was just one issue after another. We actually called in a complaint, and young people were always saying things were supposed to change or get better for Medicaid rides, but they haven't changed for years, and so the transportation remains a huge barrier. Regional transportation doesn't quite meet the expanded hours needed to serve this population, and it doesn't have the expanded locations that is needed given our rural landscape. And then school districts need the adequate resources to meet their mandate to support educational stability. This is through robust busing services. There's a potential also to codify McKinney-Vento protections into Vermont statute. I think that is a change very much worth exploring. That includes also multilingual liaisons and making sure that there are enough McKinney-Vento liaisons to match the increase of youth homelessness that we are seeing. And then I'd also note I think it's very well known across our state that there is a lack of affordable housing and an insufficient safety net for those unhoused. And it is important to note the experiences in the GA emergency housing and shelter programs really do impact where children and families are having to move to, right, to stay safe and to stay sheltered. So children and families have to relocate or move where there are hotel openings. For example, when it was open, I was at the Cortina Inn in Rutland, and there was a family from, I think, from Lamoille County. They had been up to Newport Hotel that was open and down to Rutland, so they were just moving to where they could remain sheltered. And so the inconsistent and insufficient emergency housing and shelter programs directly contributes to our chronic absenteeism levels. And so trying to solve a housing crisis with seasonal shelters then also impacts and limits the children's access to schools. And then I also would like us to think further, right? Because we want Vermont youth to stay here. I know that's also something we all know, right? And so post-secondary education must be included in the spectrum of educational supports for this population. And there must be advances to remove barriers for youth to access college. And I think some of those solutions were directly related to H64 that has been submitted prior to the state. And so to explain that more, I'd like to just read an excerpt from a young person that I worked with in Brattleboro. This is my Oh, the Humanity book. This is when we had successes, we would put it in a jar. And my wonderful colleagues turned it into a book as I moved to positions. But this person was filling out an application for college. And the question was, why do you want to be enrolled in college? And this young person wrote, as a prospective first-generation college student, college will open up doors none of my ancestors ever had access to. With the knowledge and credentials I will earn at this illustrious university, I will finally be able to attain what I so longed for during my childhood, stability. A college education, especially at college only, most often results in access to higher grade jobs, more job security, jobs with competitive wages, and the attainment of the specialized knowledge that I desire so fervently. All of this will give me the foundation I require in order to provide myself and my future family with a middle-class life, sir. And so with that, I can't say it any better than what they said. I just want us to keep in our mind that the needs of unhoused young people are dynamic, and Vermont has to remain dynamic in its responses. And so we must continue to strengthen and adapt a cohesive and coordinated approach to de-silo all of the helpers so we can best serve unpaid homeless youth, minors, and young people.
Thank you. And it's great that you're here. I remember when we created the office.
Yeah.
So to see it in action is great. I also appreciate you sort of identifying the problems, but also identifying like real solutions. Again, it just whenever we talk about various things, transportation just comes up over and over and over again. You almost feel like there should be a fleet of cars and drivers across the state making all this happen. Yeah. Oh, got a question.
You had mentioned some national statistics early on. You have local statistics as far as so nationally, I think you said 1 in 10 on a couple of things, but just as far as Vermont, what are we looking like as compared to the national average?
I could do the math if you want me to. So Vermont's point in time count of 3,386 unhoused people, 19% were children under 18. So I'd be happy to.
19, okay, so how does that compare? I'm just curious how Vermont compares to the national average. Are we trending up? Are we trending down? Are we even? We look at national numbers. We just really go left to right with Vermont and national.
I think
we have a specific problem or a unique circumstance that should be addressed.
I think BCRIP will have more specific, data point, is that right?
Oh, there's more
Jay?
testimony?
Yeah, but I also think like we know Vermont is in a housing crisis and we do have a high level of homelessness. And so the trends usually follow in for young people, like where the larger landscape is for the state. Yeah. Other question?
Thank you very much, Lauren.
Thanks.
I was next.
It is really up to all of you to decide how you would like to go. That'd be great.
Um, It's in house environment right now. I might not actually have
We can share.
these for everybody.
We can share.
That's just got a bunch of youth and homelessness stats for the state. I can talk short. Actually, I'm happy to answer questions. I have like some testimony provided or ready to share with you as well, so I'll just go ahead and share that, and hopefully answer any questions you have. I also have flyers for my parent agency that I'll pass out at the end as well. So thanks so much for having me. I'm Representative Kate Logan. I represent the Chittenden 16 district. That's most of the Old North End in Burlington and downtown Burlington. I also serve as the director of the Vermont Coalition of Runaway and Homeless Youth Programs, BCRIP, which is housed at Elevate Youth Services in Berlin. It is a statewide program housed in Washington County. I also co-chair the Vermont Committee to End Youth Homelessness, which brings together state agencies, providers, and young people with lived experience to coordinate our statewide youth homelessness response. So I'll briefly introduce our work, what youth homelessness looks like in Vermont and where I feel like the Education Committee's partnership is needed. And I'll try to focus primarily on unaccompanied homeless youth, so under 18. Feel free to ask questions kind of about the general population. We serve 12 to 24-year-olds. I would say, I'd like to start off by saying that I don't think that youth homelessness is inevitable. I think with targeted coordinated investment, Vermont can ensure that every young person has a safe place to live and a path forward. BCRIP is again, a coalition, is a statewide coalition of community-based organizations serving youth experiencing homelessness across Vermont's balance of state continuum of care. So I don't know how familiar you are with the state's homelessness response system, but there are two continua of care, one in Chittenden County called the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance, and then one in the rest of the state called the Balance of State Continuum of Care. So I live in Burlington, but I work everywhere outside of Chittenden County. And our providers are often the only youth-specific services in their communities, in their regions. Way that the youth homeless or the homeless response system is broken up in Vermont outside of Chittenden County is that there are local housing coalitions, 12 local housing coalitions all over the state. Some are county-based, like Rutland County has its own local housing coalition, but then like the NEK has a housing coalition that covers Essex, Orleans, and Caledonia County, for example. So little, broken up in ways that make sense locally to around service coordination. So our providers work within those local housing coalitions to provide services directly to you. Our network was founded in 1981 and is federally funded. As those funds have remained largely flat over the decades, there's been level funding for decades at this point for runaway and homeless youth services. Our services for youth, ages 12 to 17, have contracted. We used to serve the entire state, and now we only have service providers in the NEK, Washington County, and Windham County. So we have Jeff Hunsberger here from Lamoille County. He'll be talking about his experience working with unaccompanied homeless youth. he used to be one of the agencies funded by BCRIP to provide emergency shelter and counseling to runaway and homeless youth under the age of 18. But $250,000 doesn't stretch far enough to provide 9 agencies with enough funding to run any kind of program. And that's the federal funding level for years. So not, there are just simply service deserts for this population in most of the state. Spectrum in Chittenden County can serve a couple youth, their commissioner designated shelter, but no one goes. No one seeks out shelter there. And then most of the rest of the state is unserviced. I think there's 1 bed in Windham County. So back to BCRIP. More recently, we've received funding from HUD, Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program, that allowed us to expand housing and services for young adults, ages 18 to 24 in additional regions. For our funded agencies, BCRIP also provides for connective tissue, like all the program administration happens in our office. Representative Julie McGill is another member of the BCRIP staff, and then we have one more staff person. We provide technical assistance, data coordination, system design, do all the grant writing, et cetera, et cetera.
I just interrupt for a second. You said that you've been able to increase housing for youth 16 to 20.
18 to 24.
18 to 24.
Technically, we can't provide housing services to 16 and 17-year-olds in Vermont because it's not allowed. We can provide up to 21 days of shelter for anyone under 18, but nothing beyond that.
So for the increase for 18 to 24-year-olds, what does that look like? Is that congregate housing? Is it?
It is a mix of transitional housing and rental assistance. So youth-specific programs that are similar to like the Housing Opportunities Program. So we have in 5 agencies that are part of our Youth Homelessness Demonstration Program. So NEK, Washington, Windham, Rutland, and Franklin County all have programming. Across those agencies, we offer 32 rental assistance vouchers per year and 14 transitional housing units. The transitional housing is those are master leased by the agencies, and the youth can live there up to 2 years, and they pay their fees directly to the agency, and so they can achieve some rental history by being in a master lease unit, where technically the agency is kind of like the landlord, but it's transitional housing, so it's not rental housing. But yeah, so we have that transitional housing program and then a rental assistance program that's specific for youth. And at this point, outside of Chittenden County, the coordinated entry list, the list of folks who have signed up for services and been assessed and determined that they need medium housing, like medium length housing support. So don't need permanent supported housing, like don't have a severe disability, for example. They are then referred into our programs. Often though, our agencies are already working with youth who end up helping them get onto the coordinated entry wait list through other programming that they offer to youth experiencing homelessness. So that as our federal funding has kind of dropped off from the Department of Health and Human Services, who funds the programming for under 18, HUD has kind of increased its funding for 18 to 24-year-olds. But we are seeing a huge service gap for unaccompanied homeless youth, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. Because I want to mention, I've mentioned that Spectrum has a commissioner designated shelter. And then Windsor County Youth Services has 1 bed that they can use to provide shelter to an unaccompanied homeless youth. So in addition to BCRIP, we've also created a larger body. Given the limited nature of our funding, agencies have in some cases continued to provide services or expanded their services to homeless youth through state funding like HOP or through private funding. So for example, in Rutland County, the Mentor Connector has gotten its own funding for transitional living program apartments that serve 16 to 21-year-olds. So That larger coordinating body is called the Committee to End Youth Homelessness. That's the group that's here today. And so we have we've built that committee over the last couple of years to sort of piece everything back together again as funding has become challenging and services have fragmented. We felt that there was a need for a larger body across the state, uniting all youth service providers across the state. And so now I'll just turn to talking about unaccompanied homeless youth more specifically. The shelters that Lauren spoke about in Brattleboro and Bellows Falls are funded through the funding that I was talking about earlier. It's called the Basic Center Program from USDHHS. And the primary data source that we have for information about unaccompanied youth homelessness in Vermont is the AOE. So this data that you were hoping to find out, it's actually really hard to get data about unaccompanied youth homelessness. We have information, like Lauren mentioned, about youth who are included in the PIT count, but those are typically youth who are living with homeless parents. PIT count often can't capture unaccompanied homeless youth unless the schools are participating in the PIT count in their area, and they generally don't. So we do, though, have information from the Vermont Agency of Education McKinney-Vento program. For the most recent school year, schools reported 121 accompanied homeless youth across Vermont. That is doubled the rate of 5 years ago. So homelessness, unaccompanied homelessness for youth under the age of 18 has doubled in the last 5 years. Meanwhile, funding has stagnated, services have dropped off. It's a glaring need. We have supervisory unions like the Southwest Supervisory Union down in Bennington that are independently organizing with no resources an unaccompanied homeless youth task force because they're seeing this increase in unaccompanied youth homelessness and there's nowhere for youth to go. They end up couch surfing or staying with somebody else who isn't a parent, that it may not be a stable situation. You may know about the Compass program. There are Compass providers in every county. That is a like a family stabilization services counseling program. But it depends on how engaged the Compass providers are with their local school system. Whether there's a good rapport between Compass and the school system so that youth are getting counseling and finding stability somehow. It's really invisible right now because we don't have a street youth population. Like I think that's the typical picture we have of, you know, youth homelessness under age 18. It's too cold for a street youth population and our communities are too small. So people are young people are couch surfing. I have relationships with runaway and homeless youth providers in New Hampshire and Maine and Massachusetts and New York. And I've heard reports from them that we have 16 or 17-year-olds from Vermont showing up at shelters in Manchester, New Hampshire and Portland, Maine, because there's an actual shelter that you can go to. Here, our programs are entirely post-home programs. So in order to get shelter in Vermont as a 16-year-old, you'd have to contact a youth services agency like Elevate Youth Services, and then they would have to transport you to a host home provider who's a volunteer, provides a bed or two in their home for shelter. So really interesting patchwork, unfunded, and really, really hard to get data. I have a lot more that I prepared to say about 18 to 24 population, but it doesn't seem like the right committee for that. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about that or unaccompanied homeless youth.
Is there a pattern, especially when it comes to unaccompanied homeless youth? Are they by and large running away from unstable households? Are they by and large being rejected from their households because they're LGBTQ or some other reason? Or is every situation different?
I mean, there are patterns. It's a range. LGBTQ plus youth being kicked out of their homes is pretty common. Definitely overrepresented in the homeless youth population everywhere, and that includes Vermont. But a lot of times, for example, we served a couple youth the year that we started cutting hotel room vouchers. So youth were separated from their parents because there was nowhere to go for the family because there's no family shelter beds anywhere. And so rather than camp outside with their mom, a youth has sought out services from a youth services program and gone into like a shelter program. And then often what happens then is that case managers will work to help find a house that they can stay in with a family friend or neighbor, and then they provide case management and supportive services for that youth while they're staying in another house. So like that's an example. So poverty, I'd say, is a huge predictor of unaccompanied youth homelessness, and family conflict. And there are a range of reasons for family conflict, often having to do with poverty. But then also, untreated mental health needs, substance use disorders, which are often untreated mental health needs or related to poverty. So there's a pretty consistent sort of poverty related set of circumstances. But then the other one is that rejection by your family for your sexual identity or gender identity.
When you talk about the untreated substance abuse, do you think that's more parents with substance abuse challenges and the kids not being able to deal with that, and parents not wanting them to be there, or do you think it's the kids having substance abuse challenges and the parents not doing it?
Oh, yeah, it's both. Yeah. I think the youth who end up enrolled in our programming, it's typically the parent. We often don't see youth who are homeless due to substance use disorder until they're a little older, right?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you want these back? Would you like these back?
Oh, no.
And
Like that. And then these are.
I don't know where y'all want to go in.
Here's one.
Just one more.
One more,
Oh, Jeff has one on you. Oh, okay.
You have time. That's the
and
question.
yeah, and then we have Jeff, from the Lamoille County, Freedom Center, and then we also have Christina Brown from Spectrum, who can talk a bit about a homelessness prevention program that they've been involved with, in,
Great. Perfect.
My name's Jeff Hunsberger. I work, I'm an MSW social worker. I'm at the tail end of my career. I've worked for DCF Family Services, supervisor out of the Newport District. I was a district director for the health department down here for 6 years. And in the last 12 years, 15 years, I've been working back with youth, back where I like to work in nonprofit work. So I work with the Lamoille County Lamoille Family Center, which is a member of the Parent-Child Center Network, if you're familiar with Parent-Child Center. We are unique in as much as we'll be celebrating our 50th birthday on May 17th, which we're very proud about. We serve young people from birth through adult aid program and their parents, and supporting that birth, that the first 6 months of that cycle. And then we serve kids up to the age of 6 in the CIS program, Children's Integrated Services Program. We have a gap from 6 to 12 or 11. And then my program picks up with kids, technically, I'm the Compass program. Used to be a VCRIP program as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We serve 12 to the 24th birthday. So I look at that as two different populations. I look at that as under 18 and over 18. So let's just capitalize on what's already been said. You've heard the macro, here's the micro. Lamoille County is a complete service desert when it comes to youth. My other unique perspective is that I've been a school board member at Lamoille North for the last 10 years. So I've seen through consolidation, I've seen through watching my own child go through elementary school as a school board member, and then on to the unified board, the pressures and challenges that Lamoille North has had to try to support youth who are falling into this category. So kudos to McKinney-Vento. McKinney-Vento supports for the schools is one of the primary support functions, but it only does one certain piece of that. And if I could give you some numbers from Lamoille County, as just a point in time, if you will. As I checked with the 3 supervisory unions in our catchment area, we have about 49 youth who are being served under McKinney-Vento title. So that would also include foster youth who are in foster care. So I don't have a breakdown between that and unaccompanied youth. So 14 in the Lamoille South, that would be Stowe, Morrisville, roughly 10 to 14 in the Lamoille North, and up around 10 for OSSU, Orleans Southwest. Our AHS district, our Agency of Human Service District, services all of Lamoille County, 10 towns, plus 5 towns out of county. So that would be down the Orleans County towns of like Greensboro, Brassberry, Greensboro, Bend, Parkway, those towns, because of the service delivery systems and our designated agency, which is our mental health agency, serves the youth from those extra 5 towns because of proximity to Lamoille County mental health. So it's an odd shaped setup. So Woodbury would be the Washington County town that's kind of lumped in with us for those services. Same district area as what DCF covers. So what's unique about what's happening is, and what I think is important for you to hear from a boots on the ground perspective is this. Because we have a desert, we have no way to serve in the last 2.5 years since we had to give up the contract to the shelter program contract. We have not been able to work with the schools specifically to make sure that these unaccompanied youth, the ones who are couch surfing, the ones who are just floating around out there, they're not getting in trouble, but they're not staying at home, and there's some reason why they're not at home. And it's usually some kind of parent conflict. And you've already listened to all the reasons for that. It's either domestic violence or substance abuse. And I will say in our area, the majority of those youth are not engaged in their own substance use. It is parental substance use and abuse that is really driving a lot of those situations. Since the shelter program, we had to give up because we had a commissioner designated shelter program. I'm very proud to say that during COVID, we had 3 shelter homes that were licensed. We made the only 6 placements for shelter youth during COVID in the state. And then we had to give up the program. So we were very proud, and we've been doing it for 45 years.
How do you have a program due to funding cuts?
Funding cuts. Yeah, when VCRIP and FISB reorganized the contract.
It was a change in federal,
FISB change.
it was a change in the way the Family Youth Services Bureau within
Yes.
the ACF on the federal level did it. And so it made it, we couldn't apply for multiple grants and serve multiple parts. We could only do one. And so in that decision, we kind of tried, we could only keep 3 open. So we have kind of Washington County, Windham and Windsor, and then up in then Northeast Kingdom through Neckies. And so try to at least have, do our best and based it kind of on the youth numbers at the time. But it is woefully inadequate.
And we weren't the only ones that had to step away from that.
Yeah.
I think there were 5 smaller programs, because we were one of the smaller ones. And frankly, we ran the shelter program on $18,700 a year. I mean, that was it. And we were able to shelter kids and keep it going and move it. And we only have 3 staff, myself and 2 case managers. So it doesn't take much when we have the resources to support the kids. Now, I bring all of this up because we are one of these Compass programs that's a contract through DCF Family Services that has an outstanding relationship with our schools. And we do so much work with our schools. The vast majority of our referrals are coming from schools, whether they're youth that fall into this category or just youth that are they're on the edge of at risk. They're not getting in trouble yet because we have, in our area, we have a restorative center, which is an outstanding organization that works with law enforcement engaged youth, where people fall into that category with diversion and those types of restorative programming. So we want to enhance our opportunities to support more youth. And we don't have that opportunity because we don't have the federal grant to do it. Schools relied on us to help out and to stabilize these young people for up to 21 days in these shelter homes. And we don't have access we haven't had access to it for 2.5 years. And we're not gonna have access to it for the foreseeable future. The Federal Youth Services Bureau grants are 5-year grants.
They're kind of whatever they just said. We got a surprise NOFO and new grant cycle this summer, with 2 weeks turnaround time. But so that one, now it's 2 or 3 year, I'd say, yeah.
And we also have no transitional living program, no TLP program, which I was trying to get. My frustration with this has been that I was the associate director here at Elevate, prior to Elevate being Elevate Youth Services Bureau, for 6 years. And, we had the TLP program, we had supported apartments, we had all kinds of stuff that we were able to service youth more on a continuum. And in Memorial, we have a wall and we can't break through that wall. There's just no capacity to it. Compass doesn't give us enough to do that. Compass gives us enough money to work with. It's Medicaid reimbursed. It can serve 12 kids per month. We used to serve 25 to 30. So that Compass program has pulled us, that has been recognized and pulled as well. So there's so many services that we would love to be providing, and we would love to be partnering with the schools to do it. They'd love to have us there, but we need to find a way to bridge it. From my perspective as a school board member, I will say this. I see more and more support and more resources being put toward kids' mental health supports in schools. And I see the stress on the teaching staff and the faculty. And it's hard. It's hard for them to do educational planning, educational supports, and social services counseling and family supports, because they're in the school environment. But in our local communities, they are the community. There are rural places, they are the community. That's where people come to watch ball games. That's where people come to participate in musicals and to see shows and to see their kids participating in things, because there's just not a lot out there. You know the transportation issues. When you're spread out in the county, when you have 5 or 15 towns to move around in, the hub of those communities is that school district. So that middle school, those union middle schools and high schools. So I just want to leave you with this, is that this has real implications for people, for young people. They don't care about education reform. The kids don't care. The kids want to be in a healthy, happy place. I mean, we care about it. But we want to make sure that we can find a balance so we don't lose our young people, that they don't leave the state because nobody provided the level of support for them that they need in order to grow and be nurtured and to be loved by their community, if their family can't or it's just not available to do that. The state's not responsible for that, but we can do better as a community by re-engaging people and providing the opportunity to have relationships with these young people that are missing because we're just not able to put enough people out there to do the work. So help us by considering that schools need the level of support. I'm not necessarily advocating for schools to get more money to do this stuff. What I am saying is that there needs to be a better focus on how we, the small nonprofit programs that have these youth service agencies, can interface with schools and provide across the board wraparound services for these kids. Truancy is out of control. It's absolutely out of control. And now we have young people in high school who are choosing not to go to school to take care of younger siblings because the parents are so frustrated they don't know, they can't make the kids go to school. But they gotta go to work and keep a job in order to keep their housing and keep food on the table. So we have cyclical challenges across the board here. So there are no simple solutions to any of it, but there is a will to do it. And there are ways to be considering how to weave this together in a different pattern. So.
Why are these, especially unaccompanied homeless youth, not in the foster care program?
They don't qualify. They're not necessarily abused or neglected. Frankly, you can't, we used to have this term called unmanageability.
Yeah.
I guess it's still out there, but nobody likes to use it, right? So when a kid is acting out and not able to be controlled by a parent, then what we have is a situation where everybody throws up their hands. The police will say, he's 17.
Yeah.
He can make it on his own. He can deal with it. You know, in the last committee we were in, we were talking about kids aging out of the foster care system at 18. Really, I mean, picture it on a street corner with all their belongings in garbage bags because they have no other place to go. That's why these programs are so important.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yeah, we can hear about some possible solutions in schools and how it's going.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today and the time that you are all giving in recognition of the experiences of youth homelessness in our state. My name is Christina Brown. I'm the Chief Program Officer at Spectrum Youth and Family Services. At Spectrum, we serve over 1,300 youth each year between the ages of 12 and 30 years old with services that focus on prevention and intervention, life skills, and basic needs. We provide crisis stabilization, employment and education coaching, outpatient mental health and substance use counseling, mentoring, affinity spaces, food and material resources, and supportive housing services, including up to 30 beds for youth experiencing homelessness in Chittenden County and an additional 10 in Franklin County. We provide services through the lens of positive youth development with an emphasis on trauma-informed care, recognizing the unique strengths, challenges, social, emotional, and cognitive milestones of teens and young adults, and catering our programming to match these needs. At Spectrum, we recognize the compounding impacts of trauma on the developing minds of the children and youth we serve, and we pride ourselves in providing responsive, supportive programming that meets the youth where they are at, keeping their dignity, autonomy, and voices at the center of our work. A vitally important resource that we at Spectrum are proud to support is the Homelessness Prevention Program in the Champlain Valley School District. This unique and impactful program first piloted in early 2022 with the creation of a housing support services coordinator position embedded in the schools. The HSSC, Jenny, provides housing navigation services to families with children who are living in emergency shelters, places not meant for habitation, like a car or a tent, or imminently at risk of losing their housing and entering homelessness. She connects with these children and families in a place and through the people they trust, their school, the faculty and staff who see them every day. We often get asked why the Champlain Valley School District would be prioritized for such a pilot, being that this is not a district that many think of when they think of visible homelessness. But homelessness for children and youth is often invisible.
Since launching in 2022, the Housing Support Services Coordinator has moved 73 families out of literal homelessness into stable housing. This includes over 200 children, our Vermont students, from pre-K through 12th grade in the Champlain Valley School District alone. An additional 38 families were able to stabilize in their homes, preventing homelessness altogether. The HSSC has worked with 22 young adults aged 18 or over, homeless, alone, and trying to finish school while solving their own housing crisis. In this school year alone, 63 families have been referred to the program, totaling nearly 150 students. These are children who are unable to meaningfully engage in their education because they are already or at imminent risk of experiencing the deep and lasting trauma of homelessness. The HSSC and the Champlain Valley School District has been able to offer consultation and support to administrators and McKinney-Vento liaisons in other districts where the need for these services is high and rising. The specialized and distinct role of the HSSC in CVSD who is also the district's McKinney-Vento liaison, brings the expertise and skill set of the housing world into the field of education, meeting young people where they are at, eliminating barriers to accessing care, building on the trusting relationships families have with their schools, and keeping kids in the classrooms where they want to be. I work every day in the Spectrum Basic Needs programs, where we see youth, mostly 18 and over, coming into our shelter, often spending years trying to find stability. For many of them, their first experience of homelessness was in their childhood with their family. And I see firsthand the impacts of these early experiences. Data from the National Network for Youth has shown us that half of all adults who are homeless had their first experience of homelessness before the age of 25. We must bring services to the children in the place where they are most connected and explore solutions that make the experience of a child experiencing homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. The Housing Support Services Coordinator program in the Champlain Valley School District is one such solution that has proven time and again to have a life-changing impact on the stability of these families. For a child, we cannot separate their housing from their education. An investment in ending child and youth homelessness is a long-term investment in a data-driven solution to curb the rise of homelessness across all age demographics. Today, we have taken the important step of drawing awareness to this issue. Awareness is the first step. Many service providers are leaps and bounds ahead of awareness. We are in our communities, in our schools, with these children every day, implementing solutions we know work to end and prevent homelessness, and we need others to join us. Thank you for taking the time to hear this testimony and to bring greater visibility to a population that has too often gone unseen.
Thank you. A couple questions. Who's funding the HSS?
Right now, the funding comes half through the school district and half through the Housing Opportunity Program through the Office of Economic Opportunity. Spectrum receives the HOP funding. As an emergency shelter provider, we offer a number of other HOP funded services to youth experiencing homelessness. And we are essentially a pass-through with an MOU to the school district.
How reliable is that grant?
I would not say it is very reliable. Since the pilot in 2022, the location of and the source of the funding for this one position has changed twice. Spectrum took on funding half of it 2 years ago.
I only bring it up because when we often talk about services that schools are providing outside of classroom education, so I think a perfect example. I had another question. Oh, I hear it. I remember. Okay, that's some pretty remarkable success. What do those successes look like? How are they finding in an area, especially in Chittenden County, where it's very limited housing available? How is this person getting these families stable housing?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a full-time job. I mean, I think that's the distinction here, and that's why she's been able to be so successful, is because housing navigation in one school district alone, it's full-time. It's meeting with landlords. It is helping folks establish credit histories. It is getting them through rental training programs through CBOEO. She's with these families daily. She's moving around the county trying to really on the ground identify the housing opportunities. And that's what it takes because housing is so scarce.
So pretty much every case is different. There's not sort of a standard path.
Really, yeah.
CVSD is the largest school state. I mean, where the challenge comes is we've got a lot of school districts that are significantly smaller and can't justify the expense of somebody like that. But anyway, it's just kind of fascinating about, first of all, we do think of that district as being a district of means. Clearly doesn't, as you say, there's a lot that isn't visible to all of us. But that also takes this level of sort of sustained support to make those changes.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, she offers consultation and support to the liaisons in the Winooski and Burlington school districts as well, where they don't have the benefit of this position, but where the need is significant. We all know.
Emily?
Yeah, your question just made me think about ways to get to those rural areas and how to fund. And then, thinking of the bill we're working on, CSAs, and wondering if there's a way that we can, if we manage to get those through, is that a function of a CSA? I mean, shared services are what we need to do to reach those in the areas that are hardest.
I was having the same thought as I was thinking about transportation, just coordinating
Again,
all those rides
Yeah.
are the geographic area. Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we have.
All right, well, that was.
Questions you come up with, you drive away from here tonight, please, and it pops your brain, just reach out to, people, Representative Logan and I, and we're happy to get answers to you.
I will ask a very baseline question to any one of you who wants to answer it. Could you give a sort of a brief explainer on McKinney-Vento?
I hear it all the time, so
It's
little more about.
the federal-
Yeah.
It is, McKinney-Vento is a federal program, and I somewhere on this wall, to codify that in our state, in law in our state. So it's enacted through the Hearth Act, is where the McKinney-Vento, was authorized. And it gives some pretty basic protections for youth and families experiencing homelessness. It requires that every district have a McKinney-Vento liaison is what we call them here. You'll see them called different things, various places, or educating homeless children and youth. And so it allows youth and families to either enroll right away in their new school if they're in a shelter, even if they may not plan to stay there long term, or they would prefer, it allows them the right to remain enrolled in their prior school. It does things like allow, maybe a family has lost all of their documents and things and they've found shelter down in Brattleboro. It would allow them to enroll and for the youth to start getting, going to school and getting acclimated, and gives them a little more time to re-get all those documents and get everything in order so that the youth and the children have no loss of stability in their education. So I will say that our current administration does not like this part of federal law, and has actively been trying to get rid of these on the federal level. And so that is just why I have been pushing. Currently under Vermont statute, we only have one of those protections for families experiencing homelessness. So
And is that one protection that a student can remain in the district of where they were?
no, it is actually that they can enroll right away in the new district. I believe, maybe I have that wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. It's one or the other of those. But all of those other things kind of disappear for families. And we would see, hopefully, schools, we would have to act quickly. This would just ensure smooth, relatively in terms of their education.
Is there federal money attached to McKinney-Vento?
There is a little. The way it works, it funds our kind of statewide McKinney-Vento coordinator. Which I've heard they're doing some restructuring, but that has been Katie Preston for a while. I'm not sure where that will land, but she's done a wonderful job. And so the way it works currently is there's the limited funds. And so folks apply and do grant applications, and some get it, some don't. Where we largely see it being used is for transportation. But it's not enough, scratches the surface of the agency.
Go ahead.
I would also add that it's usually a position added on to existing committees.
Yeah.
Right, and so as we hear from really successful programs where it's a full-time job to support children and families in this situation, it's really inadequate for meeting the need.
Right, we've got lots of small districts where that job just gets lumped onto somebody else's job.
But I do think that that is where, CSIS will shine in a lot of places, but that it really is the solution for these small, like in Addison County, we could have just like one, and they could serve our multiple school districts. We have probably even more, combined. So I think it is where you could see that work really well. And the model of kind of our youth serving agencies is that they are already serving kind of their same kind of distances. So I think it would all meld really well into like a system that works.
In my practical experience, McKinney-Vento, we have McKinney-Vento individuals that are in the supervisory unit. But often when a youth is placed, when we were putting kids into shelter care, they had nobody to transport the kids. So it was a teacher who lived in the same town. If the teacher was agreeable to move the young person back and forth from whatever their out of home placement was to their school that they're enrolled in. And we would provide my organization would provide transportation for that youth for up to the first week, back and forth to school until the school could figure out who was going to do it. So that's in a small area, that's how and we eat the cost on that. I'd rather do that to support a young person being safe and sound than to say, no, we're not transporting them. So, but that's a problem.
I will add on to that one thing, in particular, last spring, it really was an issue is, I know folks have talked a bit about when the hotel program shuts down, we see youth, they go with their families, and we heard from a number of people that if they were living in a tent, because their tent didn't have an address, they then couldn't get the transportation, or because it often takes at least 2 weeks is what folks are told before they can set up transportation. So you do it based on, you're sleeping in this patch of woods, but then the police tell you need to move. And so now you're over here in this, and it's this constant, and so the youth, lose that connection with their schools. And so that I feel like is probably, we could sit down and figure that out with our schools and our systems, but that is just one challenge I know we saw last spring, and as folks are hitting their 80 days, we're going to start to see it, I think, again this year as well.
Well, I appreciate all of you coming in and sharing this with us. Very informative.
Thanks so much for having us. Forward to more less siloed partnerships and figuring this stuff out.
Hi, everybody. Tomorrow we're back in here at 9:15 with the head of the Career Technical